They told me my heart was strong, but no one warned me about the silence.
It wasn't chest pain. It wasn't a heart attack, but it felt like something inside me just quietly gave up. That was the first time I felt it. Not the sharp pain most people expect when the heart breaks, but the slow, cold hush of silence that settled in after my husband passed away. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea from the same cup I used for 40 years. The chair across from me. Quiet. Too quiet. Not the peaceful kind. The kind of quiet that presses on your ribs like a weight. The kind that makes your own heartbeat echo through the room. Doctors didn't warn me about this. They told me to watch my blood pressure, less salt, take my meds. But no one said a word about how loneliness, deep, aching day after day loneliness, would start to creep into my chest like fog and mess with my actual heart. First, I thought it was just grief. But weeks passed, then months. My appetite faded. I stopped sleeping well. Some mornings, I felt like my pulse was dragging behind me. Slower, heavier. I wasn't sad all the time, but I wasn't alive either. I just stopped feeling much of anything at all. One night, I sat on the porch and realized I hadn't spoken to another human being in over 4 days. That was the moment it hit me. My heart wasn't just lonely, it was starting to shut down. You see, the heart isn't just a pump. It listens. It responds to connection. Every hug, every smile, every voice you hear on the other end of the phone. Your heart remembers that. And when it doesn't get any of it for long enough, it starts to forget why it's even beating. This isn't poetry. This is biology. Loneliness increases cortisol, raises inflammation, and slowly damages the arteries. It tricks your heart into thinking it's under attack, every single day. And I was already in my late 70s when it began. No one tells you that loneliness is a disease. But it is. A slow, invisible one. One that looks like silence, feels like weight, and kills like time. And back then I had no idea that I was already in the first stages of what doctors now call social heart failure. But I would learn. Oh, I would learn. It started with shortness of breath. Not the kind that knocks you over. More like a whisper, a gentle tightening in the chest when I tried to carry the laundry upstairs or walk too quickly across the yard. The doctor asked all the usual questions. Any chest pain? Palpitations? Trouble sleeping? He nodded. All of the above. He reviewed my test. Blood pressure okay. Cholesterol not terrible. But there was hesitation in his voice when he said, "Your heart is under strain, Mrs. Holberg. It's working harder than it should. Has anything changed recently?" I looked at him. He meant physical changes. Diet, routine, medications. But all I could think about was the empty space beside me every night. The unanswered phone calls. The grocery trips where I only needed 1 apple now instead of 6. The silence in the house that echoed so loudly I sometimes left the TV on just to drown it out. "I lost my husband last year," I whispered. He nodded sympathetically. Grief takes a toll. But what I wanted to ask him, what I needed to ask, was something I wasn't sure even doctors were allowed to answer. Can a heart die from being alone? 'Cause that's how it felt. Not just tired, not just weak, but forgotten. Like a muscle that had no reason to stay strong anymore. He prescribed a mild beta blocker. Told me to rest. But nothing in that prescription bottle could fix what was happening deep inside me. Not in the arteries, but in the emptiness. That night, lying in bed, I placed my hand over my chest. The beat was there, steady, but different. Slower. As if it too was waiting. For a laugh. Voice. Hand to hold. And I realized, maybe the heart isn't broken all at once. Maybe it fades. Beat by beat. Until one day, it just doesn't remember how to fight anymore. I didn't notice it at first. The way the days began to blur together. One morning melted into the next, like snowflakes hitting warm pavement. Breakfast turned into lunch without much appetite. The phone barely rang anymore, and when it did, it was usually a reminder from the pharmacy or a robocall about Medicare. The voices I longed to hear, the ones that made my heart flutter or slow with comfort, they had vanished into old voicemails and memories. But my body remembered. My heart remembered. It beat softer, not just slower. Not from fatigue, but from neglect. Because here's what no one tells you. Loneliness doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply turns down the volume on your life, until you're left whispering in a room where no one answers back. I'd sit in my armchair by the window, watching the seasons change. Spring came, but it didn't feel alive anymore. The flowers bloomed, but I didn't feel their color. There were birds on the fence, but their songs didn't stir anything in me. It was as if my heart had stopped looking for reasons to respond. I remember the moment I noticed something was truly wrong. I had dropped a glass of water, shattered, and I just stared at it. No panic, no reaction, no rush of adrenaline. My pulse didn't even quicken. I sat there, frozen, not because I was scared, but because I felt nothing at all. Not even surprise. And in that silence, I understood something chilling. It's not just about sadness. It's about disconnection. When no one talks to you, when no one touches your hand or laughs with you, your heart slowly stops believing it matters. Not in a dramatic way, but in the way a candle dies when no one is watching the flame. That was when I realized this wasn't about growing old. It was about growing invisible. And my heart, once full of stories, had gone silent. But what scared me most wasn't the silence. It was how normal it had started to feel. You'd think the heart breaks loudly, like in movies with tears and screams and dramatic piano music. But no one tells you the truth. When your heart breaks from loneliness, it's quiet. So quiet it takes you weeks to notice something's wrong. Started with sleep. I couldn't fall asleep, but I couldn't stay awake either. Just drifting. No dreams. No rest. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the ceiling fan circling above me like time that refused to pass. My chest felt heavy. Not with pain, but with the weight of having no one to tell about the pain. Then came the pressure. Subtle. Not sharp enough to call 911. Just this odd tightness, like someone pressing a book against your ribs. Not to hurt you, but to remind you it's there. I would sit on the edge of my bed, clutching the edge of the mattress, not from fear, but because I had this sudden need to feel something solid. Anything that still reminded me I was here, and not just fading into the wallpaper like a ghost of who I used to be. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong. Heart rate, blood pressure, manageable. But they didn't ask about my days. They didn't ask how long it had been since someone hugged me, or since I had laughed, not at a show but with another human being. And that's when it hit me. Loneliness isn't just a feeling. It's an absence of signals. Your body runs on connection. Without it, the wires fray. The circuits dim. Your immune system slows. Your memory fuzzes. Your breath shortens. Not because of disease, but because your heart is no longer convinced it needs to keep going. I remember one morning I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because of age, not because of wrinkles, but because I hadn't smiled in weeks. I wasn't dying of illness. I was withering from silence. But deep inside, a quiet question began to rise. Something I hadn't allowed myself to wonder in years. What if it's not too late to come back? And that single thought, that maybe I wasn't finished yet, that's where everything started to change. I didn't plan to change anything. Not at first. It's strange how the smallest moment can reroute your whole life. For me, it was the sound of laughter. Not mine, of course, but from across the hallway in the apartment complex. A neighbor, maybe 70-something, was chuckling at something on the phone, the kind of warm, unfiltered laugh you don't hear much anymore. It didn't last long, maybe 4 seconds. But those 4 seconds pierced a silence I had gotten too used to. I stood in my doorway longer than I meant to, just listening. And that's when I saw the folding chair. It was old, probably forgotten, leaned against my wall. I don't know why I picked it up, or why I walked it across the hallway and set it outside my neighbor's door. I didn't knock. I just placed it there. Later I found a post it stuck to it. For company? That one act, ridiculous as it sounds, was the first thread I pulled that started to unravel the loneliness. The next morning I found a muffin on my doorstep. A note. Blueberry. For the heart. I almost cried over a muffin. Because in that moment, it wasn't the pastry I needed. It was the proof that someone had seen me. And when you felt invisible for years, to be seen is everything. From there, things didn't become a miracle, but they began to shift. One chair led to coffee. Coffee led to stories. Stories led to names. Names led to visits. The heart doesn't heal with fireworks. It heals with chairs, muffins, and conversations you never saw coming. And even though my body still ached, even though I still woke up some nights in that same quiet room, something inside had started humming again. Faint but steady. Like an old radio slowly tuning back to a signal. I didn't realize it then, but the heart, once seen, will try to stay alive. The question now wasn't, how much longer do I have? But rather, how much more can I feel while I'm still here? It was raining that morning. A slow, heavy drizzle that felt like the sky had something to confess. I sat by the window, watching the drops race each other down the glass, feeling that familiar ache in my chest. Not physical but emotional. That quiet heaviness that creeps in when no one's called for a few days. When the phone stays still. When even the birds outside seem to sing for someone else. But something inside me pushed back that morning. A whisper. Not loud. Just enough. Get up. I didn't want to. But I did. I put on that old coat. The one with the frayed sleeves and the loose button I always meant to sew. I stepped into the rain, not because I had somewhere to go, but because I needed to remind myself I could. The streets were quiet. Sidewalks glossy with water. I walked past the cafe on 3rd Street. The one I always said I'd try but never did. And then I stopped. Inside, 2 people were sitting by the window laughing about something. I caught the eye of the barista. She smiled. That simple. That human. I walked in. It wasn't the best coffee I ever had. It wasn't even hot enough. But it was the first time in weeks I heard someone say, "What can I get for you, hon?" That hon cracked something open. Because that's what loneliness steals from us. Not just the people we lose, but the parts of ourselves we stop sharing. The version of me who liked cafe chatter. Who smiled at strangers. Who asked how your day was just to hear you talk. That day I stayed for 3 hours. Just sitting, watching, listening. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt part of something, not apart from everything. I didn't talk much, but my heart did. It beat stronger, warmer, like it had remembered how to belong. Loneliness doesn't always leave with big gestures. Sometimes it slips away while you're sipping lukewarm coffee in a rain-damp coat, overhearing stories you were never meant to hear, but needed more than anyone knew. And that day, for the first time in years, I walked home slower, because I didn't mind being out in the world anymore. There's a kind of magic that happens when you do one small thing differently. Just once, like walking into a cafe instead of staying curled up in your silence. That day, something shifted inside me. Not a loud change, not a lightning bolt. Just a gentle click. Like my heart turned its face toward the light again. The next morning I surprised myself. I made breakfast and actually sat down to eat it at the table instead of standing over the sink. I opened the window, let the breeze stir the curtains, and let the morning air breathe into the room, and into me. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. Called someone. Not for any reason. Not because it was a birthday or a holiday. I just picked up the phone and said, "Hey, I was thinking about you." The silence on the other end was soft. And then I heard a quiet laugh. "I was thinking about you too," they said. It wasn't a long call. Maybe 5 minutes. But it was warm. Real. It reminded me that connections don't disappear. They just wait for us to find our way back to them. That week I called 3 more people. Some picked up. Some didn't. One had changed their number. And yet, my heart felt stronger with every dial tone, every ring, every tiny risk of reaching out. You see, loneliness convinces you that nobody wants to hear from you. That you'll be bothering people. That your presence doesn't matter anymore. But it's a lie whispered by fear. And the only way to fight fear is to act in spite of it. The more I opened myself up, even just a little, the more I felt my own pulse returning, not just in my body but in my soul. My laugh came back. My eyes noticed colors again. I started to hum while washing dishes. Little things, but everything. And maybe, just maybe, my heart, this aging, weathered heart, had never hated being lonely. Maybe it had just been waiting for me to remember that belonging is something we can choose to rebuild, even if we start with just a single phone call. I wish I could tell you that everything changed overnight, that one phone call turned into a dozen, that my calendar filled with dinner dates and laughter, that I never felt lonely again. But that wouldn't be true. Some days are still quiet, too quiet. The kind where you make a cup of tea and sit with the steam, pretending it's a conversation. Days when the phone doesn't ring and the silence feels heavier than it should. But here's the truth I hold on to now. I'm no longer afraid of those silences. Because they don't mean I'm unloved. They don't mean I'm forgotten. They just mean I've grown comfortable in my own company. And that's a kind of healing no doctor ever prescribed. I learned that my heart didn't hate being lonely because it was weak. It hated loneliness because it was meant to love, to reach, feel, to give. And every time I opened that door, even a crack, whether to a stranger, a memory, or a moment of stillness, I felt a pulse of life come back to me. Not from the outside, but from deep, deep within. So if you're listening to this and your chest has felt a little heavier lately, if your mornings are too quiet, your nights a little too long, I want you to know something. You are not broken. You are becoming. And sometimes becoming means sitting in the quiet long enough to hear your heart whisper, I'm still here, still beating, still hoping, still waiting for you to come home. So light the candle, make the call, open the window, not because it changes everything all at once, but because it begins something. Life. Again.